Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 38 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. And once again, everybody, I am joined by my illustrious co-host, and I need to find new adjectives for you.
Just get thesaurus or start dipping into other languages.
Well, I think for now, how about the uncanny raptor?
Yeah, that works.
and Raptors.
Can I be the Incredible next week?
Okay, we'll make you the Incredible Raptor next week. So Raptor's back from his Thanksgiving binge, just as I am. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about basically Power Rangers' popularity throughout the first 6 seasons. And Raptor, here's basically what I'm talking about. For the most part, Power Rangers in Space was pretty much going to be the last Power Rangers season ever.
Yes.
But since it did so well, we continued on, got the post-Zordon era, as most people will go ahead and call it. But, you know, it leads to the idea that there were going to be six original seasons, basically, all part of a continuing storyline. And then that storyline developed and changed based on the popularity of the series.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we're going to go ahead and talk about said popularity and try to analyze why certain choices were made in the name of popularity.
All right.
So here's what we're going to go ahead and do. I'm going to map out the entire series, and then we're going to go ahead and comment on a few things. Because, of course, we got Power Rangers as it started, which was a mega hit that nobody saw coming. So much that they did the Zoo 2 footage, Toei did extra footage for them.
Yeah, to extend Season 1.
Exactly. Which was 60 episodes, which I cannot think of another TV show that had 60 episodes within its first season. Heck, Ninja Turtles had 5 episodes in its first season.
I don't know. Transformers had upwards of 50 to 60 episodes in its first season, so...
Yeah.
As for a live-action show, incredibly unprecedented.
Absolutely. Now, the second season came about and had the Thunder Zords in there. Now, this is where we kind of get into the popularity aspect that I wanted to go ahead and talk about. Because the biggest question that I've always had, and everybody else has, is why did they not change their costumes? Why do they still have the Zoo Ranger costumes but the Die Ranger Zords? Mm-hmm. Now, the commonly accepted reasoning for that is because they were such a brand with the iconic diamonds and the helmets and the coins and all that, that to change them might have affected their popularity, and people wouldn't have liked it. Now, we know the story reasons, and I'm not going to talk about the story reasons. I want to talk about the real-world applications this has. Do you feel that Power Rangers would have suffered had they used the Die Ranger costumes, and do you think by not using the Die Ranger costumes that it was able to prolong their popularity into the second season?
I think that coming off of such of a mega hit that the first season was, I think that to switch those suits from all these children who had come to like these characters in these very iconic costumes, there would have been backlash.
And I could almost see that as a kid.
And sorry, didn't mean to catch you.
That's okay.
The suits are more iconic to the show than the Zords are. The Zords are, of course, a very integral part of the show. Mm-hmm. They're the second thing that people remember when they think about Power Rangers. But the first are the suits.
Yes, and I will go ahead and grant that they made a good story reason for the change. And again, it's just what we're thinking about is how would that have declined in the popularity? Because let's be honest, Power Rangers got just as popular, if not more, by the second season because they had the new Zords. And of course, it was at that time they decided to go into the movie, which also they kept the Zoo Ranger suits. They didn't change those at all. And going into the third season, they didn't change those. Now, the reason we came up with this popularity question, because it was actually posed by my wife about the shifting popularity throughout the series. So another aspect that they changed that may have affected the popularity was removing Jason, Trini, and Zach. Do you think that made the show more popular or less popular?
You know, I do not think that it affected everything as much. I don't think it majorly affected it. I don't think their departure affected popularity as much as the new Zords did. Because if you think about it from the perspective of kids with short attention spans, it may be a different person beneath the suits of the black, yellow, and red Rangers, but it's still the same suits. They're still calling the same Zords that they called before.
And the thing is I remember when I had first seen it, I was like, who the heck are these guys? Where's Jason and Trini and Zach going? I was really upset by it, but it didn't waver in my popularity of the series. Because it was one of those things like things are changing, and it was really rapidly changing at that point, too, because you were such in a status quo for a while. It is actually hard to even say there was a status quo of Power Rangers for a while.
Shake up, you get these characters leaving, you get Tommy leaving.
Yeah, and Tommy left first, and then came back, and then they all left, and we got new characters and all that.
And then Tommy's wrestling with having his powers and not having them.
Yeah, and then when the third season comes along, we get even more of a stretch with the Ninja Zords and the Shogun Zords, and then we get the Alien Rangers in there. And you could really tell by that point that they were really stretching the Zoo Ranger suits.
Resources, basically.
Exactly. Now, that went into the change where they said ultimately going to change into Zeo. And now I've heard conflicting information on this, but basically a lot of people left around Zeo, and the ratings did start to go down slightly during Zeo. Now, whether that's true or not, we're going to have to...
I've heard it different. Okay. I heard that they were starting to decline during Season 3 of Mighty Morphin, but they picked up with Zeo.
See, that's why I said it's conflicted, because I've heard both stories, but from what I'm hearing about when we get into Turbo and Space, we'll talk about that, it seems like since the movie, there was kind of a downcline. That's what I've always kind of felt, is that since the movie, because a lot of my friends, that was the weird thing, is like, when I grew up in the phenomenon, I was there when it happened, and by the time Zeo came around...
You were there, and I was one.
Yes. So when Zeo came around, a lot of my friends had stopped watching the show. And that's a 4-year period, and of course kids are fickle, but you know how I am, I'm just stubborn. Not many of my friends were watching Zeo anymore. And actually, it was about that time as well, that's when Beetleborgs came out, the first season of Big Bad Beetleborgs, and my brother, who was a diehard just like me, switched and became more interested. Yeah, he got into the Beetleborgs more than he got into the Power Rangers. Which I don't know if that had anything to go ahead and do with it. But do you think that changing to Zeo... I mean, ultimately, I think we would have to say it had a positive effect on the series. But as far as the popularity, the brand recognition to the common everyday person to be in the zeitgeist, in the popular culture, what kind of effect do you think that had on it?
Well, if we want to look at that, as for brand recognition, I think it probably had a negative effect. A negative effect that the series has yet to shake to this day.
I'm going to agree with you to an extent on that, again, because I'm stubborn. I mean, okay, being in the moment, the big thing was the command center is gone, and then you got the It's Coming thing, and I remember going into Toys R Us with my grandmother and my brother, and seeing the Zeo Megazord, and at the bottom of there, it had the picture of the new Rangers with the star, the square, and all that kind of stuff, and I just freaked out as a kid. I was like, wow, look at this. This is so awesome. What's the Zeo Crystal? Oh, that's what that means. I mean, I was just going off and stuff. And of course, my grandmother bought it for me and the Red Bowzord, and
how cute.
As you do. But I know I may have didn't affect, but again, I said I was stubborn. But, just going into that, I mean, do you really think that change in costume negatively affects the series? Because it should be about the story. I'm going to concede that a lot of times it's not, for marketing reasons.
You're growing up.
Well, reluctantly, I'm accepting that. But the point the thing I'm trying to go ahead and ask is, does that really make that big a difference in how popular the show is as far as engaging stories and kids being interested in still watching them?
Okay, so I see this from two perspectives. It would be negative. It would be negative for the casual viewers. The casual viewers are the people who pop in from time to time, and they either want to see things the way they remembered them, or If it's not the same, they'll think, oh, I don't like this anymore. I'm not going to watch it. You know, I deal with that in the freaking Pokemon fandom all the goddamn time.
Okay.
But that's a different discussion. So, however, for the core audience, the kids who are tuning in each week, it would be popular with them because if you're watching it regularly, you were probably starting to get a little bit bored with the Zeo suits after 3 years.
It wasn't so much I was getting bored, I was confused.
You're confused that these dinosaur-themed heroes were piloting around.
And especially in the third, I mean, again, the explanation for the second scene makes sense. The Zords are destroyed or disabled, and they had to rebuild them in this new form. I get that. That makes perfect sense. But when they get ninja powers, and the suits are exactly the same, then that's where I have a problem.
Exactly. Their ninja powers are based on animals, and yet they still have their dinosaur helmets.
Yes. And that was the biggest thing for me, is it just didn't make any sense. And then when Zeo came along, and
it
then
was back to a unified theme.
It started to make a little bit of sense again. It wasn't, the way I look at it now is it was cluttered, is what was cluttered with continuity, which is odd to say for a show that was on for 3 years. Because you had all this kind of visual baggage, if I want to coin that term.
That is perfect way to put it.
And you know, the thing that most people forget about the original Mighty Morphin series is it was so branded not only on the costumes, but on the Rangers themselves. There used to be, I used to have a trading card game, or deck of cards, that had the teens in there animated. And then you had the flip head morphers, and then the songs of, I think it was Combat said, "Go, Jason, go, Trini." It was so much about those 5 guys. And then they still got, after the first season, they really got away from that. And I wonder if that plays into the popularity decline as well, getting away from the characters, you know. But again, it seems to me a lot of it is visual. Seeing the Zords, seeing these particular costumes. Because, you know, we get nostalgic. We get more nostalgic when we see the Tyranno Ranger costume than we do when we see the
Zeo 1.
Yeah, the O Ranger costumes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of table this for a second, and we're going to transition into Turbo, which is the biggest drop in popularity, and we'll talk about that in part 2. So we'll see you guys in part 2.